Hi, let me give you my elevator speech. I'm Claudia Dreyfus. I write for the science section of the New York Times, which is one of the last freestanding science sections in an American newspaper, and I hope you read it in paper form every Tuesday. I say that because my own students at Columbia don't read it in paper form. We miss something. We miss the joy of finding something by serendipity and things that they hadn't expected. That said,
I have a paper copy in my bag.
ah, you are wonderful. Plus, it pays my rent.
I have to tell you something. I actually canceled my subscription when they fired Ann Abraham. And I made my husband resubscribe. I wanted to make a statement, but I couldn't stand not having New York Times.
Okay. Well, it is an honor to meet you, and I am so grateful for your truth-telling, because I've been to so many of these conferences, and people sometimes fudge the truth on this particular issue. There's a desire not to say out front what's really happening. So I'd like to, first of all, ask, in all these years that you've been advocating and pioneering for the inclusion of women in science, let me add that I'm an old-timey second-wave feminist, active from the 60s on, and when I came to writing about science, which is only about 15 years ago, I was stunned by how backwards the women in science were compared to women elsewhere in society. It was like 30 years behind everyone else. So, as an advocate, what have you seen? What do you think is the most formidable barrier to women achieving their dreams and equality in your field?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm sort of in two fields. I'm at the intersection of physics and astronomy. And what's fascinating to me is those fields have exactly the same skill set requirement. You have to be good at math, you have to be good at computing. But astronomy has twice as many women as physics does. Physics is way behind. So I look at that and I say it can only be the culture of each field. And it seems to me, over 30 years I've thought about this, that fields in which people think they're the smartest people on the planet or the most important or whatever, those are the fields with the fewest women. So if you look at medicine, for example, when I was a youngster, 10% of medical students were women. Now it's over 50%. Medical schools have completely diversified, except for specialty. You look at the most prestigious specialties, cardiology, surgery, neuroscience, those are dominated by men. And physics, physicists, I have to tell you, are there any in the audience? Yeah. Okay. An economist once told me how economists are like physicists. We all think we're the smartest person on the planet. We think there's no problem we cannot solve. And we think no problem has been solved until we solve it. And I have to say, that really sounded like what physics is like. So I think the hardest thing is that the physicists imagine their field is as good as it can possibly be. And anything you do differently is going to dumb it down. So for example, if your hiring and promotion practices have left a department with 0 women, which is what Yale's physics department had when I showed up, 0 women faculty out of some 25 faculty. They don't want to change any of their processes or any of their thinking. That's the hardest part. It's really hard to get the male colleagues in power to admit there's anything wrong with what they're doing.
I have a theory, sort of the Woody Allen theory about this, that it used to be that women couldn't get certain kind of jobs because women weren't thought of as big enough and strong enough. But intellectual work, there aren't that many physical differences when you're talking about brain work. And that sometimes the men who hold the jobs in these fields where there isn't a real barrier you can point to, and even in the physical world, we now see women winning races and doing phenomenal things that were said 50 years ago weren't possible. So even in that, the barriers have fallen, but yet in this area, if you let loose of control, there'll be no more explanations for what is. What do you think of that theory, or am I just spinning wheels?
No, it's, I think people fit the facts to they find the facts that support their theory, right? Rather than actually, as scientists should, looking at the data and making inferences from the data. For example, Alonda Schieffinger once pointed out, actually at this first conference on women in astronomy, she said that 100 years ago, there was a legitimate science of weighing brains of cadavers. You weigh the brain and you compare the brains of men and women, and the brains of men weighed more, so obviously they were more intelligent. That was a common scientific paper in those days. But then someone pointed out that if you divide by the amount the person weighs, that women's brains actually weigh more per gram of person than men's brains, and then that part of research disappeared right away. So they no longer confirmed that men were smarter than women.
And needless to point out, there's been the same kind of research about race, about ethnicity.
Yes,
Nazi science was peer-reviewed. So some of this is culture.
And it's embarrassing to think that we credit that as legitimate research. Research should have some tests. But let me say, I'm really glad you mentioned race and ethnicity, because I think, for me, certainly when I was starting out, I was just desperate, right? I was just trying to find some way to cope with this disappearance of all the women around me. And I think I was more focused on women. And over the years, I've realized that it's all one thing. It's all outsiders not being permitted into the inner sanctum. And I would say that in terms of race and ethnicity, underrepresented minorities we're far behind on that. With women, we've made white women, we've made a lot of gains, but really women of color have a double whammy of being both female and outside in the second way. So we need to do a lot better.
Let me ask you the question, the personal life question, which probably wouldn't be asked by a man, but has to be asked. Anne-Marie Slaughter spoke at my college, Columbia, last year, and suddenly I had my students come to my class in tears. We went to hear Anne-Marie Slaughter speak, and she says if we're really going to go at our career, we probably won't have a personal life. And you have to come down. The Atlantic runs that story every 2 years. They have a different author, but they run that story every 2 years. And when I was a young one coming up, I used to see the story that said, you have more of a chance of being kidnapped by terrorists than you have of getting married if you're successful. And I saw that story and I thought, oh goodness, I've got a high chance of being kidnapped by terrorists because I'm a foreign correspondent. Ooh! I'll never get me. Well, what do you say to your students when I'm really curious because all I could say is, don't read the Atlantic, it's stupid!
Yeah, where to begin?
Yeah.
Although, of course, many young women in the audience probably are already worried about, you've already got somehow in your mind that it's going to be difficult to have a career and have a family. Most young women I know are worried about this. The fact is that women without children don't do any better in advancing their careers than women with children. And despite what Marianne Mason, who wrote this book, Babies Matter, tells the story the other way, but the reason is because women go part-time when they have a family. If you go part-time, your career full-time. If you stay full-time, it does not. So women do not advance anymore with or without children. Also, women do many, many difficult things, like train in medical school. Over 50% of medical students are women, and they have tremendous calls on their time. And they manage to do it and have families. So why can't physicists, people in engineering? I don't know. And third, some people think that better family policies are the answer. personally, I think we need better family policies for sure, but they aren't the answer. If you look at the Scandinavian countries, which have had very generous parental leave policies for many years and have very good daycare, the fraction of physicists who are women in Sweden is 3%. And in the U.S., it's at least 10%. So, with our lousy family policies, so it's not about family.
So may I interrupt on that? There's a fascinating statistic. One of the stories that we constantly hear from academics is that, the tenure-getting years are the same as the childbearing years, and that's what interferes. Do you think that's true?
So I don't think so at all. I mean, I think it's okay. And Anne-Marie Slaughter, I found it really remarkable that a woman who was the head of the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton University, a tenured professor with a husband and 2 children, would say that you couldn't have a significant career in a family. I mean, wasn't that what that was?
But maybe she wants to be president.
So she wanted to. So then when she moved to another city, separate from her husband and teenage kids, commuting every week, and where she appears to believe that she still should be doing 50% of the housework, even though she didn't really live there most of the time, then, that was tough. But really, what it is, let me just say, academics, and I'm one of the worst complainers, we complain about how hard it works. It's part of the shtick, up last night writing a proposal, and I'm so tired. And I probably say that every day. But we forget to say all the good things. We forget to say, first of all, that we love what we do. When people say to me, you get the summer off, that must be so nice. No, to me, the summer is, wow, I get to do some work finally, after teaching. And then here's the thing. Most Americans who work have children. The women who are working at Walmart at minimum wage with no control over their hours, they have children. I think it's hard for them. They don't have as much money to get help. They don't have any flexibility. If you're a professor, you have 100% control of your time, including your teaching. It's so flexible. We make a decent living. I think we should quit complaining about how hard it is. Anne-Marie Slaughter and me and everybody else, and start telling you, if you want to have a family, you should be an academic because it's a very flexible, well-paid career.
And remember, when I was a kid coming up, I used to be told, be a teacher, that's a good profession for a girl because you can have a family. But when it comes to being a well-paid professor, you can't do that and have a family too because the tenure years and the childbearing years coincide.
Our women faculty, so we now have 5 women in physics at Yale, from 0, and 3 of them, let me get this right, one was just hired, she has 2 kids, I have 2 kids, I had them when I started, but the 3 who came childless to Yale, we have 6 kids among them, and 2 of them have gotten tenure and the 3rd's well on her way. And by the way, at the same time, there are 5 young men in the department who had children and who took the same parental leave. If you ask my colleagues, they only mention the women's parental leave and how it cut down on their teaching. They never forget that these guys are doing the same thing. Anyway, I'm just saying, it's quite possible.
So, let me ask you about some terms that are really laden with heavy weight. Affirmative action and feminism. I recently interviewed the winner of this year's Lasker Prize, the biologist Mary Claire King, who discovered the breast cancer gene. Now, mind you, she hasn't won a Nobel Prize, which I find very interesting. But she told me that if it hadn't been for the affirmative action requirement, that a woman being interviewed for an important job, a key job that she went for in the 70s, she wouldn't have even been interviewed. And she says very proudly, I'm an affirmative action baby. Why do you think these words are so loaded and so negative?
Well, I think women are very reluctant to be given any advantage, and they're told you have an advantage. Where I worked before I came to Yale, there was a vast exodus of women because it was not a good workplace for us. And super good jobs. I came to Yale, was a tenure professor. A colleague went to head all of astrophysics at NASA. Another one went to head the science division at another NASA center. I mean, there were just, we were asked, you know what the guys said, who were never being given offers to do anything. They said, oh, it's because everybody's forcing to hire women. And that's why they hired you. That used to bother me a lot, actually, because I want to earn my success. I don't want to be given my success. But two things fixed it. One is, of course, I'm old enough now, I see over and over again the things that have not happened that should have happened. It's really the other way. I would say the women who have made it for my vintage, I think, really had to be extra good with women made it. The second thing, though, I was talking to a colleague. Actually, the woman who was the head of the National Science Foundation, France Cordova. She comes from a research field similar to mine, so we knew each other way back. And she was invited to be chair of the astronomy department at Penn State. And then a few years after that, I interviewed for a job there. And I was talking to the dean, and he let slip that 4 science departments had recently gotten female chairs, and that they made a big effort to hire women into those positions. And that was, again, not a good feeling for me at the time. And I said to France, doesn't it bother you that, some of what you get asked to do is in part because you're a woman? She said, it doesn't bother me at all. She says, first of all, I know I can do a great job. And second of all, that's what it's about. It's about getting a position and making the most out of it. If you think those guys are going to do a better job, it's not true. And I realized at that moment that I had always thought that all these guys who were in the pantheon above me, fancy professorships or jobs or whatever, getting these prizes that never came to me, et cetera, it's true. They're no better than me. I always thought they were, and that's why they were there, and I had not, gotten those recognitions, which, by the way, I don't think they complain. She's complaining. But just to say, if you look at the same, I'm not in the National Academy of Science, for example, but you look at the people who are, and I've done tremendously more than some of them, not all of them, but some of them. And it's just a matter of, I've actually looked into this. The women don't get nominated. It's actually not even biased in committees. The women are not being nominated. Anyway, I can say, get over it, show how great you are, and that's the best revenge.
So in closing, that's really good advice. And advice I'll take. But in closing, the F word, a lot of my students, for instance, don't, even though in every single way they are, don't want to describe themselves as feminists. Why do you think that is? And if you think there's something wrong with it, what's wrong?
Yeah, I've wondered a lot about this myself. For people of my vintage, I think calling ourselves feminists was natural, and we still do. And then I saw among the students sort of it ebbs and flows whether they're willing to do so. And I think it's largely because people who are most assuredly not feminists have corrupted the term. They used to talk a lot about how feminists were all bra burners, which turns out to refer to an incident that never happened. And they talk about feminazis, right? So they have allowed young women to be turned off from the notion of being feminine. I think this is the greatest way to disempower you that, it's been done with at least with a little effort. Personally, I think feminist means you believe in equal opportunity. The nicest answer, I was asking some of the young women today before we came in, do you call yourself a feminist? And one of them said, I'm an equalist. And I said, what does that mean? She said, well, it's like feminism, but it's for every category, not just gender. And I was like, yeah, I kind of like that. So now I think there's another term that I would be willing to use, equalist, but I'm still happy to call myself a feminist, and I hope that people get it over the, you're handing power to the people who call others feminazis. When you say, I won't call myself a feminist, because that's too radical, you are handing power to the people who are trying to stop women from having equal opportunity.
What I say to my students is feminism means I'm for me. I'm not ashamed to be me. I'm not ashamed to say I'm for my rights. I'm not just for everybody. A lot of my students are human rights majors. They're for everybody's rights, but they're not certain they can speak for their own rights. And in my religious tradition, if I'm not for myself, then who am I? been such an honor to meet you, and truth-telling is in itself a noble profession. I'm so pleased.
Now we would like to open it up to some questions from the audience. A few questions from the audience. We have the next at least 10 minutes. Absolutely.
Why don't you stand up and
say your name.
And there are mics.
I'm a theoretical physicist, tenure faculty, and my research is with the particle accelerator at Brookhaven and CERN, where we're some of your knowledge from there. It has been a really great pleasure, and it's fantastic to see this audience and the variety of young women, and noticing that there are young men here too. But one of my questions is regarding how can we increase the participation of events like this and the whole big picture from our male friends, because there might be something we might add to do this on that respect, because I think it's super important aspect.
It's a really good point. If you couldn't hear, she's asking how we could involve more men in this conversation, and that's very important, which I agree in particular because, in many arenas, men still run things, so we need their cooperation and participation. I do think some men feel excluded from events like this, just from the name. If something's about women, if it's a conference for women, if it's about feminism, they feel like they don't belong. So I would say, next time you attend an event, bring your male colleagues and friends with you. I think that's the best way to encourage it. And I think also, we've all been guilty of sort of, out of frustration, blaming men for discriminating against women. And it's not that all men and women discriminate against women in male-dominated professions, but since the professions are dominated by men, we kind of talk as if it's them doing it rather than all of us doing it. I think that's another thing.
And to the men who are here, you're very welcome.
I've really noticed, I speak on college campuses a lot, I've really noticed that men want to be in feminist spaces, and maybe sometimes they feel like they need to be invited just to kind of be, to make sure, but once they're there, they really feel like it's for them too, and it certainly is, and so just to kind of echo. Anna?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Anna Portokansky. I'm also a biologist, and I'll be doing one of the breakout sessions later. I also have a list of tips for you, a little different than Dr. Uri's, and thank you so much, both of you, for your wisdom. I had a question for you about how you negotiated the service part, because I noticed in your introduction, you're the chair of the department, which is a service kind of position. You're the head of the association. And so did you always do that? Did you hold back and do that once you were tenured? And any advice on that front?
Yeah, well, thankfully, I stepped down as chair actually a year ago, so I am no longer chair of the department. I wanted to be chair, and actually the department wanted me to be chair. And it was great for a while, but yeah, so I should answer your question. I have accepted invitations to do service because I felt I should, and also gave me some visibility. Farther along in life, actually Andrea Ghez, who did the beautiful work on the black hole at the center of our galaxy, once told me that she always waits to accept, and she asks, do they need me as opposed to somebody else? Can I add something that others would not? And B, is it going to help me? And when she told me that, I thought, wow, that's very demanding or arrogant or something. And I thought, why not? We're all serving, why not? So I tried to do that. When people ask me to do something, I try to think, does it, do they need me? And does it help me in some way? I hope that helps. And I think women do get called on. Here's another piece of, in a university like mine, probably yours, where people are aware, especially administrators tend to be more involved, I would say, than people in departments. And they want to have women on committees. You end up being asked to be on every committee. And it's way too much work, and you absolutely have to ration it. Because otherwise, you are doing more of the work that is not valued in that institution, and less of the work that is.
And let's face it, a lot of what's called service in academia is unnecessary work, and you have to gauge what's real and what's just made work. There are committees for everything, and you don't have to go.
Yeah, right.
Good morning. My name is Carrie Henry, and I'd like to pursue career meteorology. I just want to know what is your take on women in meteorology? Do you see a lot of them?
That's really interesting. So I am not personally, do you know? I don't know that society, but almost every professional society has a committee on the status of women in that profession. And if you look at their web pages, you will see, you can look for that, and you will find the committees, and you can probably, I'm almost certain they would have information there. I will give a plug to the Committee on the Status of Women in Astronomy, the American Astronomical Society, of which I'm president at the moment. There's a huge amount of information on their webpage that is generic. It doesn't apply only to astronomy. It applies to many things. How to balance working with family, how to get tenure, how to do all these things. And that's a profession, I would guess meteorology is at least as diversified as astronomy. It's a profession that has changed a lot, it's increased a lot of. The things that you need in meteorology are some understanding of physics, especially atmospheric physics and computing. And those have, again, traditionally been male skills. So my guess is it might be a little bit like that. But because women tend to, sorry, I'm putting too many ideas together quickly. I don't want to jump too far. But somebody was saying women care about doing things that help people. Actually, you were saying that you didn't understand why certain parts of science, why science is relevant until you took the particular course. Right. And I think meteorology is a place, we teach a lot of science without context. We don't tell you why we're learning about this. We don't say why there's an inclined plane with a block on it. We just say there is. You're on the course. Don't ask why. Okay. And I think the sciences for which the context is obvious, like biology or medicine or meteorology, those are sciences that attract women because you see the good and the important in it without having to be told. With physics, when you take intro physics, I mean, somebody ought to tell you all the amazing things you can do if you understand physics, but we don't. And so I think that's one of the differences. So I would guess meteorology is an excellent field to go into, but I don't have the exact numbers. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Claire Weaver. I'm a physics mathematics major at Hofstra University. And I'm wondering what we as undergraduates can do to raise awareness in our science departments. There is a need for, more education to be shared in a way that encourages learning and changing our perspective. And we're already so loaded with our coursework that sometimes to take that on feels daunting, but that need is there and deep within a lot of us. And we just want to be able to share our voice and share this with the people in our department, our professors, our peers, male and female, and just encourage dialogue. How can we initiate that in our universities?
Yeah, really good question. A couple things. One, do you have a women in science group? You should, if there are enough of you, you should have one in your department. If there aren't enough of you, then have one across departments. And then ask to meet with the department chairs. And tell them the things that you are concerned about. I mean, any department chair should be eager to get this right. I can tell you that their bosses, the administration, will be definitely more up to speed on this. So I would recommend that. And also for the rest of you, there is a national conference, which is called the Conference for Undergraduate Women in Physics. Yeah, great. Okay, and they're now, I think, 8 or 10 regional sites. Yale is giving one this January. It's always on Martin Luther King Day weekend. And although it says physics, it's actually quite broad. It's all kinds of physical sciences. I'm sure biologists would also get a lot out of it. There are women's sciences that talk about women in science. I encourage you to attend one of those if you can in your region. This kind of stuff, the women talking to women, has kept more people in science, more women in science than anything else, I think. And that conference has done an amazing amount of good for women in science. So good luck. Definitely do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we gotta move on to our next thing.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm in high school, and I feel like a lot of the focus of this conference has been on, undergraduate, higher education. And I think a lot, given that a lot of your audience is in high school, I want to know what, as a high school student, and what, as high school educators, we can do to sort of foster that interest in science, without feeling like, as Jen was saying before, it's, socialized that women aren't good at science. What can we do to prevent that before we get to college?
Oh, yeah. I think just excel at what you do. I mean, join Science Olympiad or after-school clubs or just, rock your chemistry class. Whatever thing happens, I think celebrate what great you are and stuff. My daughter told me in 3rd grade she's so good at math, and I reamed her out. After I stopped shouting, I suddenly realized, what happens to girls whose moms are not like me? I never heard another peep from her, and she's great at math. But what happens to all the kids whose moms are not like me and who say, okay, honey, you're good at English, right? I mean, I see how it happens. I really see how it happens. So you might be that kind of support system and inspiration and prodding for a classmate who doesn't have as much encouragement at home. That seems to me a very important thing. Because the ones of us who are encouraged from home, both my parents were scientists, we get there, despite the obstacles. But there are people whose parents are telling them to do something else. This isn't good for you. And maybe you can bring them along with you.
I think also, if I may interject, the answer is the same as for the young woman from Gloucester. Form a group. Teen, young women in science. The more people get together, the more things change.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jen Ferrero. I'm a computer science with bioinformatics concentration, and I was just wondering, I was looking at 2 of your slides in particular. In the 80s, there was a giant decline in computer science, and I was just wondering, do you happen to know what maybe caused that decline, and is there any way we can prevent a decline like that in the future?
Really, really good question. I don't have, the perfect answer, but a great deal of that. Well, first of all, there are fantastic women in the history of computer science. I mean, if you haven't heard of Ada Lovelace or Grace Hopper, you need to. So I think there was and women were interested in that. And interestingly, there's a new book out that talks about how initially men were keen on the hardware and women were left to do the software, which turned out to be the interesting part. There were a lot of women doing it. The decline, I believe, came from a vast influx of foreign students who were preferentially male. That is, not few women came from abroad, but lots of men came from abroad to study, and that's part of that decline. But I think it also changes the character of the workplace. When there are fewer women in the workplace, then it's less attractive to women. And the whole .com ethos of, work all night and play ping pong is not necessarily the lifestyle that lots of women. Some women, yeah, okay, but not maybe not others. So I think it's unfortunate, but the history ought to pull women back in, because there was a tremendous amount of pioneering, important work done by women, and women can certainly do these jobs. And they're actually, can I just say, the sciences that don't have things that are alive, medicine and biology have live things that have time scales. Those are really constrained experimental times. You have to be in the lab now and 8 hours later and no, but computing you can do any time. So it's a very flexible, very, you can make great salaries. It's a great place for women.
My name's Renata Tariq. I'm a recent graduate in mathematics, and I was wondering about mentorship is something that really interests me, and women being science mentors and reaching out to younger people. Do you think that women who are successful in STEM fields have an obligation to mentor younger women, and if so, what does that look like?
I don't know what the answer is.
I think it's really, for me, I find it very fulfilling, actually, to mentor younger women. I don't have all the answers, though. And one of the things we find is that, you probably realize this already without having me here to do it yourself. It's easiest to mentor someone who is just like you, because you have a good insight to what they're thinking. You don't know, but you have a better insight. If somebody's really different from you, they have a different background, they have people, it's much harder to get. I have the problem when a young woman comes to me and says, you know, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I don't think I can do this. I don't know what to say, right? On the one hand, should I what I would have needed is someone saying, of course you can do it, get on with it, right? That wasn't what I would have needed if I said that. But maybe they really would just want permission to go do something else, right? So maybe the advice they really are looking for is, you know, sure, go into this other field if that's what. So it's a very tough question. I think we all try to do it, and we'd be better off if we recognize the variety of mindsets people have and realize we don't have all the answers. What I finally did, I used to be really wishy-washy and say you could do this or you could do that. And what I finally thought is, they're hopefully they're asking lots of other people, and I'm just going to tell them what I think. And that's the best I can do. But I try to make it clear that it's not that I don't have all the answers, right? For people who are on my path, I probably have more answers than not. But nobody has all the answers.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a short break and move into the breakout session zone. I want to invite people to come and speak to Dr. Yuri, or personally if you would like to, and to Claudia Dreyfus, and to me if you want to learn more about the feminist press. My teammates wearing black and name tags can help you following the breakout session. It might be perfect for you. And take a chance at whatever. They're all awesome. So thank you so much.